like if I want to really live up to the highest potential, highest level of my self-actualization, then I have to keep asking myself, why not me? Why can't I do this? How hard
Mm.
can it be? And it's such a dumb, naive question, but without that kind of chutzpah, you can't leap into action
Mm.
and take a shot. Otherwise, you're
Mm.
living in your head too much.
Hello, KP. Thank you so much for joining. I can't express how excited I am to have you here on the call today.
Thank you. It means a lot, that you invited me, especially because I feel like I have a very, very tiny, teeny role in this podcast, the whole series, the whole show coming to life because you were part of the podcast program and you were one of my favorite students. You were one of my favorite action takers, and you really took what we were talking about in the fellowship, in the cohort to action. And here I am in a full circle moment as a guest to you. So stoked.
Yes. Well, I would add on to that and said it is not just a teeny tiny. And later we're going to talk a little bit about belief capital, but I would say you are one of the reasons why this podcast is here. Listeners, why you get to hear my voice is because you have contributed one of the whispers that made me realize like, this is something I can lean into and something I'm going to keep exploring. So I so appreciate having you here. Is like you said, it's a full circle and it just feels great.
That's awesome. I'm stoked. I'm excited. It's
Yeah.
also one of those things where I felt right from the early days when I got to know you, Andrew. I really felt there was a sense of mutual appreciation and sense of connection, and it's hard to place why. Maybe because I was also into no code, you were also into no code a few years ago,
Yeah.
but I don't believe that it's just the tangible reasons. There was some intangible gravitational pull that I feel like people who operate from deeper parts of their core have towards each other. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
in basketball terms, they say game recognizes game. I felt the same, vice versa, hopefully, where I could recognize a long time ago. And it's been so blissful and satisfying and meaningful to me that we got to keep bumping into each other the last 6 months a lot more. And
Yeah.
I really consider you as a friend now. And remember that call we had 2 weeks ago where I did like a gut check of my new idea and a rebrand or whatever with you,
Yeah.
and you were such a great sounding partner. So I appreciate all of those interactions, leading up to this. So thank you for all that you bring to everybody, including me.
Yeah. I appreciate that, KP. Well, I want to kick things off with something that I found kind of in the archives, which is a Tumblr blog called Be the Purple Cow.
Oh my God.
Now, now my first question for you is, well, one, why did you start it? And like, what does it mean to you back then? And especially now looking back, what does it mean to you now?
Wow. Wow. I don't think like I have about 50,000 people who follow me now. I don't think like more than 2 people know about this. So this is crazy that you went that far. So it's probably 2011 and 12, or yeah, that era is when I took interest in blogging, writing. A lot of that was inspired by Seth Godin and his book, the iconic book called Purple Cow. And I read that book when I was leaving India in 2011, just before August. And I moved here for my master's in August 2011. And then for those 1.5, 2 years, I was doing a lot of soul searching. And although formally, I was enrolled in the master's program for electrical engineering, I really felt that was not my calling. Like, I didn't mean to just be inside a lab group or research writing, thesis papers. Academia was not my future. It was very clear. So I was soul searching, and part of it was exploring new things. And I thought, okay, what if I took up writing? Like just expressing my thoughts and ideas. And I gave myself a challenge to write every single day. And I learned that Seth Godin on his blog posts every day at 5 a.m. And he did this for like 15 years or something at the time. So I thought that was like so dope, so cool. And I was trying to mimic that, do a version of that and at
Mm.
the time the hottest platform, newsletter platform or writing blogging platform was Tumblr. And so I enrolled, I mean, I signed up and created an account. But in retrospect, I should have called it something more creative than Be the Purple Cow. But I was like such a big stan of Seth. Shout out Seth if he ever gets a chance to listen to this. I wrote 50 days in a row, and I emailed Seth Godin that this is
Oh.
also there's a lot of me today. Sort of the blocks, sort of the bricks of me today have taken shape during those days. You can see a lot of that. This shoot my shot energy, this like cold email, the cold reach out, the fearlessness energy, and all of that, has been there since 2011. So I emailed Seth, and I think one or two times I emailed him, didn't respond. So finally, when I hit 100 blog posts in a row, I emailed him again and said, Seth, sorry to interrupt you, but I'm such a fan, and look at all this work I created. And it was not in copy of any of his work. It was basically like something about action taking, something about change, like my experiences, my stories, but I knew that he would resonate. So I think he read 2 or 3 posts, and he actually replied
Mm.
saying, this is awesome, great work, or something like that. And I
Yeah.
kept in touch with him through that email exchange. And I remember the one memory I have from those days is at some point I hit 300 or 400 in a row. Eventually I went to 700, but at some point, 700 or maybe 600, I forgot. But like at some point it was such a big number, and Seth replied to me something on the lines of, "You're a legend." And it was
Wow.
such a big moment for me that point that I took a screenshot, I framed it, took a printout of that email. It was so cool. That blog didn't go anywhere. Of course, one of my biggest, retrospectively, I look back, one of my biggest mistakes was I didn't really build in public. So
Mm.
it wasn't built with the community. It wasn't like putting my ear to the ground and asking them what should I write more about, what resonated. There was no talking to the users, as YC would say. I was just kind of expressing myself and writing to the user of one, audience of one. And I think eventually I had maybe like 150, 200 readers. But
Mm.
after 3, 4 years, I gave up. But it gave me a lot of practice in the form of short, because it was mostly 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. So it gave me a lot of practice in writing, which is still paying off dividends.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. I also love that little additional tidbit that you email them after like you said first 10 and then obviously like 100.
Yeah.
Um, well, something I'm really curious about, which, well, for me, you always talk a lot about reps, right? And when I first discovered that blog, it was so eye-opening for me because it it humbled me because a lot of time you talk about reps and there's reps that you can see. For example, I think as of this morning, you have like 38,278 tweets, right? You talk about how often you do reps, newsletter, but even before way back then, you were already putting these reps, right? To practice to get some stuff out. Well, one, you mentioned it was largely because you wanted to soul search, right? You wanted to find something that means out of your, let's say, what the school could teach you. But during those early moments, what about writing consistently, writing daily, contributed to this vision of, well, one, you knew you wanted to find something, and two, I know you're already very motivated to explore, founder, being entrepreneur. Why did those things kind of go hand in hand for you during that time?
I think it was mostly trying to find my voice, in this
Mm.
noisy world, um, and trying to like be more of an active sort of contributor, more of the person who's in the front seat of his own destiny and not in the back seat. And I think that was the fight that I was having, that would I let my destiny be just circumstance being the driver, driving me wherever the circumstance takes me, or would I
Mm.
be the kind of person who jumps in the front seat even when there's a circumstance trying to drive for you, because everyone has the circumstance, at driving, trying to like take control of the steering wheel. And so there's this constant fight that I had back then about, am I the kind of person who would be in charge of my life, and so I
Mm.
needed those reps. I needed to push myself every day. I needed to do something outside my comfort zone and prove to myself that I am the kind of person who's the CEO of my life, as they say, right?
Mm.
I've said this a couple of times. Even before becoming the CEO of the fellowship or CEO of the Leaderbird or what are these all these companies I started, I first had to become the CEO of my life, And so for that
Mm.
to happen, I needed to do things like this, which now, decades later, looking back, don't matter for the
Yeah.
audience that I serve and people who are my customers. But to me, they were building blocks of my confidence, and my conviction about, what kind of person that I want to be, right?
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, I definitely came to America with the dream to be a founder. I think that was very apparent to me. Even on the plane, I was thinking on that long ass plane from India to Nashville.
Yeah.
Um, I was still thinking I remember thinking very intently about how do I become a great founder? How do I become a great tech entrepreneur? But the challenge was like I don't even know what it meant to be one of these. Nobody in my family, first of all, is an entrepreneur. Second of all, a tech entrepreneur, right? Because tech is such a modern thing, and um, startups and tech were not a thing, where I grew up. I grew up in a small village, and being a banker in the village was sort of the greatest achievement you could have had, So
Yeah.
I had to level up. I had to like really raise the ceiling of my ambition every 2 years, and that I did a lot of that in my teens and late teens and then early 20s, and I feel like even now I'm constantly doing that, the work of trying to raise the ceiling of your ambition
Mm.
every 2-3 years, um, because so much of this is um, overcoming your own limiting beliefs, right?
Mm.
I see great entrepreneurs today, and the difference between them and a fledgling entrepreneur who's filled with self-doubt is not so much the technical skills or the tactical skills, because they're learnable. The internet's free. Everybody can learn pretty much anything, no code, whatever you want to learn. But the biggest barrier in the first few levels of this is just self-doubt and limiting beliefs and thinking that who are you to go live the dream that you want to live, is the voice that I feel like a
Mm.
lot of us initially have to overcome. And eventually it becomes, why not me? Which is where I am right now. So when I
Mm.
see someone succeeding, I'm like, why not me? Right? I'm not in a comparison way, but like if I want to really live up to the highest potential, highest level of my self actualization, then I have to keep asking myself, why not me? Why can't I do this? How hard
Mm.
can it be? And it's such a dumb, naive question, but without that kind of chutzpah, you can't leap into action
Mm.
and take a shot. Otherwise,
Mm.
you're living in your head too much. But yeah, so those, yeah, I think the intention to be a founder was there, and the soul searching and the writing were, to me, I mean, the writing especially was like a challenge to see if I can produce something. Um, and it was actually very, very hard, as I think back now, to come out of the identity that I was only good for academics,
Mm.
because my whole identity until 21 was that I was good at math and science, and I was an engineer in bachelor's in India and then master's in robotics. Like,
Mm.
who would have thought that today I would be the building public guy, right? It's like the
Yeah.
farthest thing ever, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of built my own bridge from that identity to this identity. And now nobody even bats an eye that if I go up and say, hey, I am the like building public guy, or I can do marketing, I can do sales. In fact, the fellowship is built on the premise that I know I know something about sales and marketing. But it wasn't like this, initially. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of writing helped, a lot of copywriting. I also did a special copywriting class when I was at Vanderbilt, my master's. I was the only non-engineer. I was the only engineer in
Mm.
the class which was filled with art school students and English majors. Because copywriting typically is,
Yeah.
you don't see a lot of engineers do that, right? So it's always been an off. I always had a very squiggly path, Andrew. That's something that I'm always fascinated at. Like,
Yeah.
my path has always been so squiggly and non-linear, and I just accepted it now.
Yeah. One thing that fascinates me is like where, because you talk a lot about this deep belief that you could be more, you can do more,
Yeah,
you can give more, and sometimes you talk
yeah,
about you can like love more, right?
yeah.
Both to others and yourself. But initially, and you use the word ambition, right? Where where did that come from, right? You were a kid growing up like Bumper Room, and I remember you told stories about how, you didn't even have running water growing up, right?
Yeah.
How were you even able to kind of envision yourself into the future around a version of yourself that could be better, especially coming from a place that could be also, especially doing it in a patient way that you weren't like, I need it now. I need to make $5 million by next year, right? Which I've seen some individuals have, right?
Yeah.
How do those two things come together to shape who you are today?
I don't know. I think my best guess of the answer is perhaps this incremental, um, leveling up, like I said, right? At every
Mm,
turn, what can I do to level up and rise up, to the next step in the ladder, the next step in the ladder. And I view like this, you know, um, our journey in, once you have sort of certain sense of awareness and consciousness, I think from there to the day you die, I think the journey to me is kind of like climbing a pyramid or a mountain. And
mm,
the mountain is self-actualization, right? Like you've been given this life, and you've been given a set of skills. Like some people are sharper with certain things, some people are, smarter about other things, but the rest you can teach yourself. And you
mm,
have been given arguably the most potent device in the universe called the human mind. Like just brilliant. Like you think about how powerful our mind is. And people think like the internet's powerful and people think AI is powerful. Think about a human mind, right? Like I'm watching that come to life with my son, who's 2.5 years old. And I'm like blown away by the level of intellect, the quickness, the way that our human beings, we learn and grasp things. I'm like, wow. The other day I asked, this is dumb off topic, but like the other day I asked him, do you remember what we had? Do you remember the colors of the cookies we had at the music class? He and I go to this music class, which is that whole thing.
yeah.
He's 2.5 years old. He told me that Daddy had brown cookie and he had orange cookie. This is from a week ago. I don't remember them.
Oh,
And 2.5 years ago, 2.5 years, like our human mind can recollect memories like that distinctly, like photographically. Blows my mind. I don't think we appreciate. So I think the at every turn of my sort of journey in my career, um, I only did what was slightly out of my comfort zone. I never did
mm,
anything that was sensational, ever. Like I couldn't have possibly even imagined. Like you said earlier, the biggest deal for me was, can I make money at all? And I think I remember
mm,
when we moved from Pamuru to Hyderabad, the city, and the family was in a financially tough situation. I was like 12, 13 years old. Somebody told me that you could actually tutor. And I was
mm,
like, I think 11th grade, and one of my friends told me that you could actually tutor and get paid, which, by the way, I didn't know. I didn't know you could get paid through
yeah,
tutoring, especially if you're not a professor, because I was a kid, right? 11th grade. And he introduced me to his neighbor who was a rich doctor, and he lives in the rich zip code, and I lived in the poor zip code. And he was sort of my gateway to the rich zip code, where he said, KP, why don't you go? Because I know you're looking for some money to help the family. And I was by the way, I'm like 11th grade, which is 14 years old, 14, 15, no, 16 years old or something. And he was saying, why don't you go pitch the doctor couple that you would tutor their daughter and you would teach them math or whatever, and then you'll get paid. And so I remember that was my first ever cold pitch. And I went and I pitched my academical, my background, because I was a very
yeah,
strong math kid. And I told her, I remember my favorite word, I don't know, some version, I said, I know how to get the 99, because she wants a 99 or something for her daughter.
yeah.
And I said, but I'm going to give you even a better deal. I will make her fall in love with math. That's the better deal.
Wow,
Sold. She said, that's what I want, right? Like, think about it. Any
wow,
parent wants that for the kid, not the damn like score, right?
yeah,
So she realized that I was operating at a different level than just any other person who's just transactional, And so I told her my own story about how like I hated math and then I fell in love and then I learned, so that was my actual first goal. So I remember I made 5,000 rupees, and that blew my mind because it was half the money that my dad was making in a month that I made through this one thing. And 5,000 rupees is like in perspective is, you know, $35 or something. And I thought that was, you know, so to your question, the perspective was never how could I become a millionaire at 33 or 34. The perspective was how can I get the next win, you know. And for me, the next win was $0 to $35 a month. And then when I got there, then I got, how do I go to the $50 a month, you know? I remember again in 20 so I also would recognize I was not in a hurry, but I was moving quickly. You know, I would never settle in a stagnant place of either financial stagnation or personal growth stagnation. If I felt like I was not leveling up enough, I would challenge myself with something bigger, you know. So when I graduated from college in India, my first job was paying me 20,000 rupees, which is 225 or something, you know, $225 a month. And I spent 8 months there, and I quickly realized that is not my future, right? So I realized, I asked myself, what is my next leveling up move? And that happened to be coming to America and then, you know, challenging myself to see if I would do a master's. So, you know, but at any point, if you asked me like, KP, would you be a billionaire one day? Or would you, you know, I don't think I had these mega grand answers. Even now, I feel I have a very strong, deep conviction that I will be a billionaire, Andrew. It sounds so dumb to say that out loud because I know how the game is played, and I don't even get any. I'm not even like in a rush for it because the real fun is in the anticipation. You know, the real fun is not in the actual achievement. The real fun is in the lead up to that. So I 100% know I will become one. As long as I live, I will try to get one at some point. Right? It'll happen like, you know, maybe I'm 52 or 85. I don't care. But all I want to do is make sure that I have the most fun and I do the most impact to others as I'm doing that.
Well, the first thing that I was thinking about that made me smile was, well, just hearing about your tutoring experience, because I've known you now that you became, you know, such a good teacher. Like you already have the charisma, you have the joyfulness, but you also have other core qualities like the patience, the empathy to be a good teacher. And I just love hearing that there were some early like roots to that, right?
Yeah.
I love
So
hearing that.
funny, right? Like it's so
Yeah.
funny. I also, the other thing too is that I never thought, like, if you asked me, because I started so many companies before this, I never thought this would be the main thing that would bring me a lot of joy and a lot of growth now, right? As we're growing this, and like, man, like if I don't know if I would pick ed tech and education as my number one choice. But somehow like your life's calling, your life's work will somehow keep calling you. It will keep making that phone call, and it is up to you to pick up the phone and answer, you know, because it will always try to guide you towards it. So I have a feeling that maybe, you know, education is the space that I'm meant to be. I never thought I would be here, you know, for sure, but maybe, you know, I don't know.
So for listeners who probably don't know this, you have had, like you said, you've done a lot of things. You've been founded a lot of companies. We're talking about at least like 18 no-code projects. We have one, a project that you spend all your savings on, where you try to build like a development, you know, company to build it out. And you've also been program director at 2 different places. Today, how are you able to looking back and know like which phone calls to pick up, right? There's a lot of people calling you. There's a lot of signals saying you should do this. There's a lot of saying like, this is going to be really fun, KB. You should take a look at this. This is going to be the next fun thing. How are you able to find your own barometer or rubric to be like, ooh, here's what I need to keep honing in, and here's what I'm using now to determine what I want to do for the next, 5 years, for the next century?
Yeah,
Next decade, not century, sorry.
Well, I mean, yeah. I do think in decades and sometimes centuries. No, just kidding. I think if you look back, they look like I've done a bunch. It always feels
Yeah.
like a bigger number than in reality, where I always felt like I was doing two or three things at once, and that's it.
Mhm.
And I try to make sure that two or three things don't clash into each other. For example, right now in the season where I am right now, I'm focused on the podcast, which is a very different experience.
Yeah.
So I like to say like I'm the CEO of my podcast, right? And so I think about how do there are all the stages of the podcast journey, as I'm sure you've now known, right? It's the how do you pitch the guests, and how do you schedule time with them, and how do you prepare the questions, and so all these steps. So but that division or that media company is separate for me in my mind from
Mm.
the fellowship, which is the educational experience, and those are separate from the SaaS products that I'm playing with right now and I want to build. And so at any given at any given time, I'm only doing two or three things, so I don't feel like I'm doing a lot. But when you look back with the no code stuff and all these other things, it feels like I've done so much. Um, so the question about how do I pick? I do actually have a criteria that um, I use, which is there's usually three steps of this. I think I forgot, but I've done this exercise intentionally in January when
Mm.
when I was at the crossroads and I had to really make some big decisions. I think there were three parts to it, if I recall. One was, um, is this bringing me a lot of joy?
Mm.
And shout out to the title of this podcast, right? So joy of building. And so if nothing else, I want joy to be the factor that keeps me going. So that's number
Mm.
one. And the second question I ask myself is, do I feel like this has a compound effect? Does this have an inherent compound advantage where if I do this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, um, it just compounds, right? Some things compound, some things don't compound. For example, that the newsletter, the Be the Purple Cow stuff didn't compound. So it was very clear
Mm.
because I was doing it the wrong way. But if you take the podcast compounds, because I would just keep doing the thing and it keep going, keep going, and keep going. And suddenly it takes one or two big episodes to blow up. Or one that is that, right? There's like an upside effect where suddenly one or two big episodes can elevate completely whole game. Or somebody can listen to the 2021 episode I did with Gary Vee, which is 2 years ago, right? Which is a compound effect. It's still paying me
Yeah.
dividends that somebody listens to that episode and then trusts me and then builds trust with me or DMs me and says, KP, can we work together? Right. So you
Yeah.
should always think about the compound effect. Does this lend itself naturally to a compounding thing? Usually, as
Mm.
Naval says, code and media lend themselves. So if you built a project that's forever, if it's low friction to keep it maintained, I think that's a great one, right? If you have a project that can be that's an asset to the internet, and if it's low maintenance, a no code or code doesn't matter. Code compounds and also content compounds, right? The beauty with content, another thing is what blows my mind is imagine if I did an episode with Arvid Kahl, and that was like last year, let's say. That if somebody checks out that episode, they still get value today,
Mm.
and I didn't do any work today for that episode. Number one.
Yeah.
Number two is 10,000 people could check it out, and I don't need to work hard. 10 million people could check it out. I don't need to work hard today. You see what I mean? Like
Mm.
it's so detached from my time and my presence that it's such a great asset to have flying
Mm.
around in the internet, So anyway, so I think about that. Number two is, does it have a compound effect? And number three is, do I genuinely believe that I'm driving value? And this is a tricky question
Mm.
because a lot of the times imposter syndrome kicks in and initially you may feel like you're not driving a lot of value, you're not adding a lot of value, but you cannot rely on your own words. So I look for other people's qualitative feedback. Data is great if you have enough data, but sometimes you don't have enough data in the early days. So I look for what people are saying about what I'm doing. If I see the
Mm.
words like thank you, if I see the words like this was awesome, if I see the words like keep doing this, oh my God, this was amazing, that's a good sign. I'm in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Um, and like so one of my practices is that often I go to our jot form, which is our tool that I use inside in the fellowship, and I read through all of your NPS surveys, and especially I read through what was the impact of BIPF on you, how did you feel this, et cetera, et cetera. And I've taken some printouts of those, and those words mean a lot to me because that's my motivation right now. That's my fuel. Because there's no enough data. I don't have a million students to like draw charts and say, boom, here's the grand data, right?
Yeah.
We only have 45 people. So, and half the people didn't complete the form. So I only have 25 qualitative pieces. So I have to really rely on my gut trusting that data, or sorry, that
Mm.
words, otherwise I'll be running out of gas very quickly and it's very easy to give up, right? So
Yeah.
I use the combination of joy, compound effect or compound impact, and the third one being, do I believe that I'm adding value?
Wow. Something that resonates deeply with me was, well, this idea of you printing out the printout, like what people wrote in terms of the feedback and how much they enjoy the Better in Public Fellowship, was that, when I started my coaching, I obviously also didn't have a lot of data. One thing
Uh,
I started doing was collecting video testimonials. And initially it was just purely for like I was thinking already like, oh, I can display my website like this, it can look cool. But what became a bigger value that I never expected, which I once tweeted about, which is that there were days that I would doubt myself. I only had like 2, 3 clients, and I would watch those videos, and I was like, "Whoa, I did a really good job."
yeah,
Like he's genuinely happy. She's genuinely
yeah,
telling me how much I helped her, and that is, to me, that's bigger than maybe here getting like 200, 300 users on a platform that I've done before, right? This,
yeah,
like, hearing somebody say, "You've helped me, you've
yeah,
changed me, you shaped me," was just such a satisfying feeling.
yeah. And that's all you're gonna get.
Yeah.
I think I'm slowly warming up to this reality that until you get to
Mm.
PMF, product market fit, which is an elusive thing that we're
Mm.
all chasing, and it takes time. Like it takes 5, 6 years to get there. So until you get there, all you can hold on to is this qualitative, did it resonate? Did it make impact? Did it create value kind of, responses and authentic feedback from people, right? Like social proof. Um, but that's the only thing you're gonna get. I think the challenge is our minds are looking at the mess of the path and trying to use that as justification that maybe what we're doing is not good enough. Maybe we're on the wrong
Mm.
path. Maybe whatever. And the funny thing is, it's kind of like the grass is greener thing. So when you try a new tactic or a new pivot, only the first 10 steps are green. The next 90 steps are filled with blood. So you might as like, so once you get in there and then you're like the 11th step and you're bleeding again, you're like, what? Why am I bleeding again? Like, yeah, buddy, this is entrepreneurship. Like the game
Yeah.
is filled to be messy. The game is like set up in a way that it's
Mm.
hard and messy and, like sweaty, so there's really no, it's kind of like if you and I were in a marathon race, or I mean some kind of a ultra, whatever they call these, like crazy mud race or whatever, and then
Yeah.
halfway in that race thinking, you know what, maybe I should have done this triathlon thing with the bicycle, maybe that would have been easier. Like how, like after mile 95, like that would kick your butt too, right? So it's your mind is constantly looking for an easy way out to
Mm.
justify, because it just never has, we've never been trained to persevere through something as hard as it's a self-inflicted wound. You could anytime quit and go back to Google. So my brain always thinks like I could anytime quit and go back to my normal job, because I'm very
Mm.
employable. I know that I can easily go get a job in
Yeah.
Atlanta. So my brain's constantly hijacking the reality and trying to paint as if like, hey, by the way, why this is so hard, like it just should have been easier by now. And so I'm always battling that voice. It's like what I said earlier,
Mm.
in the 2011 2012 era, the biggest voice I was battling was, would I just be a passive spectator and never live my dream? And now that I'm living my dream, by all means, the biggest voice that I'm having to
Mm.
battle is, maybe you're on the wrong path. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a
Mm.
more optimized way. You know,
Mm.
why are you going through the messy path, right? And I
Yeah.
know 10 years from now on a different podcast, hopefully yours, I'll say, wow, how naive
Yeah, that was all worth it.
it's all worth it. So
Yeah. Wow. I love that because I wish more people can hear that. Well, one, understand as entrepreneurs know that that feeling they're not alone with it because half the battle is that version of their voice, and we all have our own versions of it. They sound differently. Uh, they also are a fusion of voices of people around us,
yeah,
our peers, or even our
yeah,
parents, right? And I would say half the battle is dealing with that
yeah,
voice, right, or talking to it.
right.
Um,
It's hard, man.
yeah, I mean, I wanted to.
I wish
Yeah,
I could tell you. I mean, this is something I was thinking because I had 16 calls this week with founders, and every founder had a
yeah.
version of this exact thing that I've told you. And
Wow.
I was trying to, so it kind of became like therapy calls with me, right? And I was trying to like sort of give them a reality that they have the feeling that because I have distribution, I have brand, I have this personal brand, whatever, podcast and Twitter, newsletter, and they're like, what they're really asking in subtext is it easier for you, KP? Right? Because you have the thing that we're desperately seeking and we don't have it, and it has to be easier. I'm like, it's not easy. I wish it was easier, right?
Wow.
It's still hard. I think like 10 years ago, me now, I think I'm a lot more. I have insanely high conviction and insanely high perseverance. I have a lot more. Like I have very less self doubt now. I think that's the one thing I conquered because I don't ever
Mm,
um, delude myself into thinking maybe I'm not a good fit. No, I am a good fit,
mm,
for whatever I choose to do. But still, the market reality of like, how do I um, tweak the offering of what I have to the desires of the customers, balancing the pricing models. Like this is the game, right? Like, and so in no matter, like I made a tweet yesterday that you could have ran 20 marathons before, but if you run the 21st marathon with me, if we're together running this,
mm,
you still have to run
mm.
every mile. Like it doesn't get shorter just because you ran 20, right? You still have to
That's so
run.
true. Yeah.
And so the medal is
That is
waiting for
so
you at the
true.
finish line. So everybody's like, where's my medal? I ran 4 miles. And I'm like, no, this is a marathon. They're not handing out
Yeah.
medals. And it doesn't matter if you were the fastest person to reach the 100-meter dash or all these early sprints doesn't matter. It's the messy middle that we need to persevere.
Mm,
And then the real medal or the reward, whatever, is on the finish line. So this
mm,
is the story that I keep telling myself. It's like, AP, you're on the right track. People are paying you. They're putting their hard-earned money into this. They're paying you. The NPS is high. Look at the signs and the cues of what they want to do more of. Do more of that. But buddy, like it's not gonna get easier. Like buckle up. This is just how
yeah.
it is. Accept it.
Yeah.
Find peace in it. And one day you're gonna look back being proud of the journey.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of a quote that from the book by Viktor Frankl that talks a lot about how if you can figure out the why, then
Yeah.
you can deal with the how, right?
Yes.
And I hear you talk a lot about your why around the purpose. And I want to zoom in on the word value because when people think around the value, they may think a lot about, a lot of like business sense, like, oh, I can solve a solution, right? But because I know you longer, I know for you, a value means so much bigger. It means from doing things from a place of service,
Yeah.
right? And that's hard for people to comprehend,
Yeah.
right? In term, especially in the entrepreneur's journey. So, what does that mean for you, and how has that also been part of the why that made this just a little bit easier?
I think, yeah, first fundamentally, my maxim is that I equate, like there's a sticky note somewhere. I have to find it. It says business equals service and service equals
Mm,
joy. That's me. And I think
mm,
it was Rabindranath Tagore, who was a uh, famous Indian poet who wrote this, that something on the lines of like, he was searching for joy in the world and suddenly he stumbled into service and he found joy and he realized service was joy. Like some version of this. It's not exactly this,
oh,
and I fully resonate with it. Every time I was searching for happiness, I was searching for something like joy. It always had a component of offering something, selflessly to somebody with no thank you, no expectations, nothing, no anticipation of reward, just offering something because it's just the right thing to do. It's just something that I wish somebody would do for me, kind of thing, right? And that has
yeah,
always left me with more happiness and more joy. So I realized that the biggest game I'm going to play for the next 50 years is going to be business. right? Like I'm gonna be like Steve Jobs said something on the lines of, your work takes up 70-80% of your day. For me, I love my work, so definitely 70-80% of my life is gonna be work. So I try to hack that and say, instead of trying to do business in a one way and then nonprofit activities and all these other charitable things on the side for like 2%, 3% of my day, what if I build my foundation of my business life with service and and
Mm,
and kindness and value? That doesn't mean I don't charge people money. That doesn't mean like, it's like a charity. It means operating from the core principle of, I want every customer to feel like they ripped me off, and that's a good thing.
mm,
Because they will tell their friends and say, "You gotta go get to that KP thing. It's a crazy thing." I want people to feel so indebted, to whatever I do,
mm,
that here's a person, at every interaction, that person gave more than he took, because the business world
mm,
is filled with takers. So to stand out,
mm,
to me, it's actually strategically very smart from an MBA point of view to be a giver. But
mm.
I'm not doing it from the MBA point of view. But even personally, it makes me feel amazingly satisfied going to bed, thinking that today I gave more than I took from all my meetings, all my sessions, all my events, and everything.
Yeah. And I can see it as, well, one, I want to first call out how, as someone who went through your building public fellowship, I also paid for it, right? Where
Twice,
I
actually.
felt
You did too.
everything.
You did two
Yes,
cohorts.
with the podcast fellowship as well. But absolutely everything you just said, I felt that, right? And even as a payee, there's a part of my rational brain is like, ooh, am I gonna get my bang for the buck, right? Am I gonna get value? But I remember, and I think I said to you, which was like, initially, I, I already got the return, which was how good I felt.
Mhm.
Just being in your sessions, feeling the giving that you're giving. We're not talking about the bullet points yet, all the lessons or challenges, just those sessions, how I felt. That I already felt that. And I can imagine your end, you're giving so much and it feels so good. You going to bed smiling. That also makes it easier to just wake up and do it again for the
Yes,
next cohort, which is also coming out a few days. Yeah,
exactly.
I imagine that.
That is exactly it. It's just the
Wow.
intrinsic joy from feeling like, hey, I'm not really working. I'm just serving people, and I'm helping them, and only a few will resonate initially, right? And being okay with it, being
Mm,
humble enough to realize that only a few will resonate, but the ones who did are the right ones, and I'm grateful for them. You remember how many times I gave a thank you in the beginning and the afternoon, and like the slides always had a version of like, thank you for taking a bet on me, because I truly believe it. 10 years
yeah.
from today, it would be way easier to take a bet on me or the fellowship or whatever I build. Because 10 years from today, I
Mm,
would have that much of brand, that much of proof, that much of whatever, undeniable proof. So now it's
absolutely.
mostly trust. So you guys trusted me, and so I take that very seriously.
Mm,
I take myself very lightly, but I take the responsibility very seriously. And so every session, all I thought about was, I remember Tal was saying, KP, your slides were brilliant. Like every slide was just a banger, And I said, that's partly because I'm also tired of like fluffy slides that have no value. I'm very impatient in terms of like, give me the value. And partly
yeah.
because I genuinely want everybody who came to the fellowship or to listen to the podcast, whatever I do at this point of my life, I think I want everyone to feel that, yeah, KP just really, really, really gives and tries his hardest, in putting love and hard work into something. I still, frankly, though,
Mm,
Andrew, I still think that I could do more. That's the funny thing, right? That's the thing, right? You never know when you have done really well. That's why this whatever I do, I'm gonna continue doing this, especially the fellowship and on the cohorts and everything, because I get a chance to iterate on what's working, so I can make it better and better and better.
wow. I love that. And I'm so grateful I got to witness this. I would say pretty early on, because I do believe that you're gonna, three is such. It's gonna be such an BIP. Three is such a small number compared to the journey you're gonna have, right?
Yes.
Um, well, I would always like to leave listeners with something they can take away. And so what is a challenge that you could give out for a listener who is either an inspiring or even a entrepreneur, um, who's either thinking about it or is struggling with this journey?
So, a challenge is in a maybe a question to think about, or
Mm,
a call to action, or what would in what way?
yeah. Uh, Either. It could either be like a something that they can take away or something they could try doing.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind is just offering a sense of it's gonna be okay to everybody who is listening.
Mm,
You may be aspiring founder today. One day you'll be full-time founder. Actually, I went through 3 stages, so I'll probably talk about those three. You may be an aspiring founder for a long time, like I was, and then you'll be a part-time founder, like I was, and then now you'll be a full-time founder, like I am. And knowing that in every version of you, your real job is to keep moving forward and being graceful to yourself, right? I wish the younger version of me, the 2011 version, had the wisdom that I have now, but you can't, that's not how it works, right? Wisdom comes through failure,
mm,
wisdom comes through experience. And you just, that's not how it works. So I'm always in my daily journals or in my meditation, I'm always giving grace and gratitude to my younger versions of me. Because if any one of them gave up, I wouldn't be here. They had
mm,
seen so much shit in their life, so many hurdles, so many obstacles, dead ends, visa issues, like financial troubles, so much pain that those versions went through for me to be on this pod and like rock it, right? So this version has to absolutely always give gratitude instead of thinking, man, I could have done this or I should have done this, So I'm always giving grace. And so I wish the same for you all, is to give your younger versions a lot of grace and a lot of love and a lot of gratitude. Because without, like, there's a great quote that I once read that if you want to know how powerful you are, remember that you survived every one of your worst days. Whatever
mm,
you labeled as the worst day ever in the past, you survived it. That's why you are here. So instead of thinking that, man, why do I always keep running into worst days? In fact, feel like a victor where, damn, no worst day could take me down, right? A small shift in mindset. Um, and so I always think about that. I'm um, like so much gratitude to my past, and and just I think if we all could be a little bit more graceful to each other, um, the world be a better place. I think because we're putting too much pressure on each other. I think subconsciously, nobody I know who's successful, who's super, like elite by any means, is crushing it every single day. I know them really well. I'm very close friends with some of them. On a day to day, in the micro, if you look at what they're doing, it's all messy. It's all messy and it's all squiggly and it's non-linear. Doesn't make sense. But if you zoom out and look at the
mm.
macro, it makes sense. So, hopefully that can help you realize that if your life is going through a messy phase, that's okay. There's light at the end of the
Yeah.
tunnel.
I absolutely love that. And KP, I can always count on you for shining your light and just make me feel so warm and bubbly inside. So, well, thank you so much for your time. I've had the greatest pleasure to be able to kind of interview you on this podcast, and I've enjoyed every second of it. So, thank you so much for joining
Me
today.
too, and I loved it, and I felt like the time just passed so quickly, which is always a great sign. Both as a host and a guest. So, thank you so much, Andrew. Thanks for having me, and I'm super excited for the rest of these episodes and like your podcasting journey. It means a lot. I always say this, we need a lot of authentic, um, you know, and graceful voices in the podcasting game. We need
Mm,
yet another sports podcast that's talking about, I don't know, Boston Red Sox, whatever, like, it's cool. Like, I'm not saying we should not, but we need a lot more people who are deep and thoughtful in the podcasting game. That's partly why I do my thing.
Mm,
Same thing with entrepreneurship. I'm always rooting for people like you, because I'm like, we need more voices that are authentic in the arena,
yeah.
not in the sidelines. So wish you all the best, and I'll keep in touch.